So Michigan, you look up in the middle of the game on Saturday, and you're like, oh, okay, so like it's a little bit better. Michigan's playing better. They're starting to get going, and then it's like, no, well, still, still 21-3. Why aren't they scoring more points? And then you understand that like Davis Warren threw 3 interceptions. So they beat Arkansas State 28-18. The score clearly is not indicative of the game that was played. Almost all the, points for Arkansas State were mop-up points, but points nonetheless. Michigan did get it back together on the ground, and they ran it for over 300 yards. Mullings over 150. But this quarterback thing is an issue, folks. This quarterback decision that they have to make at Michigan is an issue. They've got to make a choice. Now, it seemed like they decided to, like, after 3 interceptions, say, okay, Alex Orji, let's see what you've got. So Alex Orji won on the field. But again, it was a lot more running than passing. What's really strange to me is that Davis Warren made a lot of really great throws. And then all of a sudden, just some bonehead throws. You're like, whoa, you can't do that. And as a quarterback, man, you have got to be the rock and the consistent player on the field. You cannot make those giant mistakes. And he made giant mistakes. You make those giant mistakes in the wrong game and you get beat. Okay? Playing a 10-point game against Arkansas State is not going to make anybody feel all that much better about what Michigan is doing this year. And I think Sharon Moore knows that, but it's not making his life as a first-year head coach any easier. And I think that they've got to make a tough choice at quarterback. Okay, so here's why. Both of these guys are very inexperienced. Orji has not played a lot of football. Warren has not played a lot of football. Okay, so thinking that you're going to go play with both of those guys and that they're going to serve 2 different roles and purposes within the offense, I think is naive. And I'm saying that to myself because prior to the Texas game, that was my belief. Is that no, I'm unbothered by the 2 quarterback system because they can play 2 different roles within that system. And because of that, 2 different roles, everything's going to be fine. And it wasn't. And it wasn't. And that's very clear now. So they've got to make a choice. It might not even be one of these 2 guys, but they've got to make a choice because the play at that position to this point is not good enough. You play like that at quarterback against USC and they will be beat on Saturday. That's just the facts of it. USC is far too advanced on the offensive side and getting so much better on the defensive side that like this is a really precarious game for Michigan at home. So they better have an identity with their offense. And the sad part for this all is like they've got to find that identity in practice because we haven't seen it in the game. So that's why it's like it's time to pick a path and view it like this. View it this way. The season is this road, and at some point you've got to pick the road that you're on. And it seems like right now Michigan's at a fork in the road. And the further you go down the middle between the fork, not making a decision, all you're doing is creating more distance between the 2 roads. That's all you're doing. So now you're just more in the wilderness if you don't go back to one of those roads. I don't know which guy they're going to choose. I do think that Davis Warren has struggled up to this point. You see a lot of good things. It's 85% really good things. But the 15% is the things that actually lead to losses. So the bad for Warren leads to losses because they're turnovers. Turnovers are not something that Michigan can handle. They're not built to handle turnovers because they're not built for explosiveness and quick scores. A big concern for them coming out of last week is Colston Loveland left the game in the 3rd quarter, didn't return. We'll see what his status is like. I do also, by the way, with Michigan, this is not just an offensive thing because I've got concerns on the defensive side for Michigan. I came into this season thinking that Michigan was just going to be able to maintain all of the things that they did before. They were one of the most well-coached teams in the country. Their game plans were incredible. And they had this ability to play a cohesive brand of football that was what's the word? It's like very team oriented. It was very cohesive. It was complementary, as they like to say. And what I see from Michigan this year is not complementary football. I see the offense turning it over. They didn't win the field position battle against Texas. They couldn't get off the field on third down against Texas. So now all of a sudden you're fighting with yourself because you're making life more difficult for yourself within situations within the game. Let me just give you an example. I made the analogy last year, and yes, it was us and me here at the Joel Klatt Show, that Michigan last year was the boa constrictor, and I had even made that reference the prior season. And let me explain what the boa constrictor actually was and why it's different from what they actually do now. Here was the boa constrictor, was that they were totally unfazed in previous years, and more specifically last year, in playing tight ball games into the third quarter. It didn't faze them at all because they weren't going to run out there like Alabama and score touchdowns of 25 or more yards. They wanted to. Part of their plan and part of their philosophy was to hold the ball, sustain the drives, grind it out, limit the number of snaps on the opposite side so that they could limit the number of defensive snaps their defense had to play. Once the defense went out there, here was the defense's job. The defense was playing a style of game that was like, listen, we know we're very good, so what we're going to do is we're going to line up properly, we're going to leverage the football, and we're going to tackle really well. And we're not going to take a lot of chances. Because of that, they were forcing teams to snap the ball 9, 10, 11, and 12 times in order to score. And I can just tell you from experience, covering football and even playing at this level myself, it's really tough to get a college offense to execute 9, 10, 11, 12 plays multiple different times in a game. It's almost unheard of. And that's what Michigan banked on. It's like, listen, they're not going to be able to execute for that long against us. We put too much pressure on them just with our leverage, our physicality, and our tackling ability. Okay. So what did they not do over the course of the last few years? They did not manipulate the structure of their defense in order to create pressure. They were not blitz heavy. Over the last 3 years, they blitzed 29% of the time. That was around 50th in college football, specifically 48th in college football. 48th. Okay, so about average. They weren't manipulating their structure in order to create pressure. The problem now is that's Wink Martindale's entire MO. So he wants to blitz. He wants to blitz as their defensive coordinator. They were over 50% blitzing against Texas, and on the season, Michigan is blitzing at the fourth highest rate in college football at 48%. So they went from 29% over the last 3 years in which they were dominant, didn't lose a Big Ten regular season game dating back to the 21 season against Michigan State on the road, and they were blitzing 29% of the time. Now they're blitzing 48% of the time, and I don't believe that their structure is quite as sound. Okay, so the philosophy is not there. They're not playing complementary football. And I think that they need to get back to that at some point. Here was where the boa constrictor comes in, is that they were fine playing these one-possession games into the third quarter. In fact, the number of times Michigan was in a one-score game in the second half in the last few years. 2021, 7 times. 2022, 9 times. Last year, in a national championship year in which they went 15-0, they were in a one-score game in the second half 7 times. And here's what would happen. They would be in a one-score game and the offense would score, or they would score to take the lead in the third quarter. And then that was the time for the defense to get aggressive. The defense would then get aggressive because they knew that a 3-and-out at that point was really putting pressure on the opposition, and they could get that opposition defense back on the field. The offense could lean on them again, possibly with a long drive. And now you're entering into that late stage of the third quarter, early stage of the fourth quarter, and that's when you can finally take your 2-possession lead. And guess what? With the style of game that they play, it was over. That was the boa constrictor. It was squeeze, squeeze. You don't think you're dead. You don't think you're dead. You don't think you're dead. I'm kind of living. I can kind of breathe. And then you can't. And then you can't. That was Michigan. This version of Michigan is different. They don't play complementary football right now because they don't win the field position battle. They're turning the football over and they're blitzing too much on defense. Those are my concerns with Michigan. They're specific because I've covered them 8 million times over the course of the last 3 or 4 seasons. By the way, in those games in the last 3 years, they were 21-2 in those games I referenced. I'm just going to bring that stat back one more time. 7 times in 2021, 9 times in 2022, and 7 times in 2023, for a total of 23 times. They were in one possession games in the second half, and they were 21-2 in those 23 games. That's the best record in the country. They won 91% of the time. Why? Because they played complementary football. They need to get back to that. Thank you for watching the Joel Klatt Show YouTube channel. And if you liked this clip, make sure to like it and subscribe to the channel, and you can stay up to date on all of my college football coverage.